I'm Jez Benton, and this is Route to the Top. I'll be meeting with a whole range of leaders. We'll climb a mountain together and do a video podcast from the summit. In this episode, we're in the Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. I'm here with Andy Tometich. He's the CEO of Quaker Houghton. And for the first time, we have to show it to camera, Andy, we had to wear spikes because...
All four seasons.
All four seasons. If you could see behind us, in fact, we'll probably film behind us on the way back down. We have a big snow slope and a few icy patches as we came up. But it is a gorgeous day, and we're at what, 9 a.m. in the morning, 9:30?
Yeah, it's
something like that. So we set off at 6-ish from the hotel, drove up, and then did this hike. So it's been great. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining me. I'm going to start. Well, it's called Route to the Top. So we usually start with what's your route been, what's your journey been, but I'm not going to start there. Yeah. I'm going to start.
Star ready.
I'm going to start with why chemicals? Because you have been in this industry pretty much your entire working life.
Yeah.
So what is it about the industry that drew you to it and that's kept you here?
I enjoyed chemistry as I was coming up through high school and college, and always wanted to do something related to it, always more technically oriented. I'm one of those STEM type people. But chemistry in particular, I think always just made sense to me. I always call it like Tinker Toys. You're just assembling different pieces together and reassembling and creating really cool stuff that actually makes life better. But once I got into the industry, what was really fascinating is it's referred to as a process industry. So there's not one step. So you're not just making a widget. You're not just compiling a bunch of parts, assembling it, and then you're done.
Right.
You're typically going through multiple steps, and it always fascinated me, the idiosyncrasies of that and some of the complexities and the balancing you had to do if you made a choice in one step, what that was going to happen to you downstream. That was always intriguing to me. And then the people. It's a very committed industry. I mean, next week at the ACC meeting, there's a lot of people there I've known for decades, and so it's a pretty tight-knit community too. And so the combination of kind of the characteristics of the industry and then the people, I think, have always drawn me to stay.
So that's great. When was the last time you were into the chemistry mode? Like, when was the last time you were in the R&D area going, oh, this is interesting?
Oh, interesting. Just a couple of weeks ago. So one of the committees that Quaker Houghton has, and therefore I have, at the American Chemistry Council, is called Chemical Management, which deals a lot with the regulatory environment. And there's a number of materials right now that we're engaged with regulatory bodies to manage them properly around the world. And some of those have direct impact to us. Not that we make them per se, but we use them, or our downstream customers may be using them, and so it has an indirect impact on us. So 2 weeks ago, in preparation for the meeting next week, in that committee meeting, I sat down with a couple of our R&D folks to kind of go through, okay, where are the impacts for us? Which of these are more critical? What's going to happen if this regulation happens on it? How are we going to be able to pivot and still meet our customer needs? So 2 weeks ago.
Right, 2 weeks ago. Good. I always like to ask a question like that. It's either that around sort of the work that's actually done, or the clients. So I have a view that, even if you're the CEO of a company, if you're running a bureaucracy, you're a long way away from what's happening, and that's either doing what you do, i.e. the chemistry and the R&D, or it's working and dealing with clients and talking to the customer and building those relationships. Yeah. And I know you came up through the sales track, so I'm assuming customers always on your mind.
I mean, I always say, I think one of the best ways to learn an industry and to learn a company is to start in sales. Because you have to not only understand what your company can do, but then match that up. What it means in the real world, right? And where's the value proposition associated with doing that thing you're doing? And it enabled me to get a lot of exposure to different types of customers, different end markets, different applications. I think it also opens you up to seeing possibilities. I had a great, I think it was my second sales manager when I was in the field, who would teach us when he would go occasionally with us on customer calls. in the office when we would sit down, he would quiz. He would say, find 10 potential applications looking around this office where our product could or has touched something that was made in this office. And it's just another way of, if I was sitting back in the bowels of the enterprise and you don't have that experience, you're not always thinking or looking for those things.
Yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I alluded earlier to Quaker Houghton, the not oatmeal company.
Not oatmeal, not motor oil.
What are the things that you are chemistry-ing, if that's a word?
At a really, really basic level, we provide chemistry, but it's part of really an engineered solution. So it's about matching what we produce with what's going on in our customers' operations. In our customers' operations, the way to think about it is, as molten metal comes out of a furnace, you can envision this, right?
Yep.
Molten metals come out, whether it's steel, aluminum, copper, all kinds of alloys. It has to be cooled down and shaped into some two-dimensional long form. Could be a sheet, could be a rod, could be a tube.
Yep.
And there are a lot of mechanical and thermal stresses that go into that. And if our customers could do that without any processing aids, they would, but they can't.
Okay.
And so that's where we come in. We help them with processing aids that enable that, so they keep their quality levels up, they reduce their scrap rates, they manage their energy consumption. We help them in optimizing the operations of their equipment and so forth. So our chemistry is applied to really allow them to operate as efficiently as possible. Then as you go downstream from there, so now you have a sheet, or you have a tube, or you have a bar, you could use a CNC machine to actually carve out a gear or a bearing.
Yeah.
You could take that tube and make it into an aluminum can. You could take that sheet and it becomes a door panel for an automobile. And again, there's many processing steps that go on there. So we're there with our customers there too, helping them with in-process rust prevention, cleaning aids, preparing it for the next step with lubrication, so it's going to go through the equipment well and so forth. And then we complement all that. So we're in that kind of that metals value chain, ultimately making parts. We will also provide fluids that are useful to our customers' equipment. And then occasionally we'll actually make a product that stays with the end metal product. It could be an anodizing material. It could be a special primer for a specialty coating that's going to happen.
Right.
And so we'll also participate. So in that entire metals value chain, wherever there's
you could be playing
liquid
multiple parts in that.
Exactly, and it allows us. We really get deep relationships with the customers, because we're very rarely solving one problem.
One thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and we were chatting as we were walking up. You're saying, depending on what plane you flew here in, it may have been through some of our processes to lighten the fuselage so it decreases fuel usage and
but still maintains its strength.
But still maintains its strength. So does the business have a view and an eye to the sort of sustainability, emissions, how you can play a role and help in all of that?
Yeah, I start back with the way I just described the business to you. If you think about our value proposition in all those different applications, it's reducing scrap, making sure that the quality level is at the highest level for our customers, making sure the operations are going well, allowing our customers to redeploy their engineers on other problems. We don't always talk about it that way, but those are all sustainability plays.
Absolutely.
And so I think the entire industry needs to talk about that more, and we need to talk about that. And that's kind of inherent in our business. And by the way, one of the things that really attracted me to join Quaker Houghton. Then, when you think about the way we formulate products, we're pretty agnostic, and we can use just about any raw material that's out there, and we formulate very regularly with renewable raw materials. And then of course we've got sustainability goals around our own production and the impact on CO2 with very aggressive targets, procurement, and making sure that we're buying from the right types of suppliers that are doing the right things. We also have our DEI goals around our people, and then just our formulations, as I indicated. So we kind of have a four-pronged way.
Yeah, I was going to say you're coming at it from four different angles.
Think about sustainability. So it's one of those, this is why I say, and I could keep going, but I won't, because it's so inherent in everything we do, and that's really exciting for me, because there's opportunity in the market. The problems keep getting more challenging for customers, because as they're pursuing their sustainability goals.
That's right, you're helping them with their goals and their investors, and that's where the client partnership comes in to be much stronger, because you're helping them solve other problems that they've got, which isn't the fluids and manufacturing problems. There's a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, that's the fourth part to the value chain, or maybe the first part to the value chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, let's talk about you then. So we've heard a bit about the business, and again earlier I mentioned you've been in the chemical industry your entire career, but your journey is a really interesting one, I think, where you've been and what you've done and the roles that you've had, and for the last 2 years at Quaker Houghton. But let's rewind back to coming out of college, first job in this space, and then sort of from your view, what were the pivotal assignments or pivotal roles that you had that you're like, man, I learned a ton, and boy, that moved me forward in my career. That enabled me to take the next step. What were those kind of springboards as you went along?
Yeah, well, first I would say my route has been nonlinear, which I, by the way, I think is one of the secrets behind some of the opportunities I've had, because I've been willing to try, and there's been a couple of those pivots. But yeah, coming out of university, I wanted to get into the chemical industry. Got into the commercial role. I was at the former Dow Corning, the joint venture focused on silicones. That's now, parts of it are in Dow, parts of it are in DuPont. But I was there over a 27-year period. But as we were chatting at dinner last night, I feel like I had 4 different careers in the 27 years that I was there. So that first stint was in commercial, did a couple different roles. The first one was also working a lot with our distributors, which kind of taught me also how to lead people. Because I had to motivate a sales force that didn't necessarily work for me, but was key to my success.
Love those roles.
Right,
the big influencing role.
And got to learn, what was going to motivate them, how to help them target things, and how to really focus in on the right things. And then second role commercially, I went kind of the opposite. I went to like key customer management. We used to have a paper business, which interestingly enough has some analogies. If you're willing to get past the superficial, obvious differences, there's a lot to making paper that's like making metals. Some of the processes.
Some of the processes. Got it.
So that analogy has kind of helped me here to pick up a little bit more quickly at Quaker Houghton.
So it was nothing like The Office. They just sold paper, right, in that show?
No, we didn't. Although there were probably some of the antics.
David Brent.
There were probably some of the antics that I'd like to forget that went along with it. But anyway, I learned the paper industry a lot. While I was doing that, I went to grad school part-time. And as I was sharing with you, kind of in our company at that time, the next path was, okay, go back to corporate headquarters, get into either a classical marketing role, because we had classical marketing roles, the 4P type approach. So I did that, and I actually took a role. So this was one of the pivotal moments. I took a role, I turned down a role that everybody else, all my friends were like, why did you take that one? It was kind of a normal one that everybody would have aspired to. And there was this other kind of crazy one that was a lot of cats and dogs, and there was some new technology, and we were trying to cooperate with our joint venture partner in Japan. That looks interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, what? Just the adventure of
curiosity.
that? Okay.
Curiosity. And so I'm like, all right, let me sink my teeth into that. And that led to some reasonably good outcomes in the U.S. And I had expressed a lot of interest to want to go overseas early in my career.
Right.
Because that was part of my academic training. And then also just given my childhood and where I grew up as a kid in the Midwest, I wanted to see the world.
Okay.
And so it was kind of reinforcing that personal piece too. So I got a chance to go do that, and that's when I lived in Wales and got to experience the 4 seasons every day.
Wales, it's just like this, only grayer.
But as I told you, it was a fantastic time for our family. We absolutely loved it, and that was kind of the second continuation of a pivotal moment, because that was my first chance of really like doing business development and building a business. So built up a fledgling team from the beginning, traveling all over the continent every week, setting up, technical teams, commercial teams, working directly with customers, building up a business. And that ultimately led, what we were doing was trying to create an avenue for some new technology that we were planning to launch. And as we were doing that, we got to the point where we were ready to launch and had to make a decision on how we were going to scale. Were we going to scale, or were we going to let somebody else scale this? And so we looked at two parallel paths of either acquiring or divesting.
Right.
And that was pretty heady because we were doing both in parallel. And we ended up acquiring, and after coming back to the US for 9 months, my wife, who is a saint, agreed to move our small children again in the 9 months in the US back to France.
Wow. So how intentional, Dow Corning or Corning Dow? I never know which way.
Dow Corning.
Dow Corning. How intentional is Dow Corning about those kinds of assignments from a talent development standpoint? Is that normal for them, or is that you seeing the opportunities, finding the opportunities, and making that happen? Is it a bit of both? Was there somebody that was like, you should do this, it'll be great for your career? Like how was that navigated?
I'd say I had the luxury of, it was an environment that wanted to develop people. So there were avenues, but the path that I took was at the extreme.
Okay.
So, for example, there weren't a lot of others, unless you had a very special technical expertise at 30 years old that was needed in Europe. You weren't going to go get assigned to do that. So that was a little more at the extreme. I think the reason, I think they took some shots on me. The environment was there, but also, I had been willing to take kind of some, I call them left turns, 90-degree turns, and see where it went, and had managed them relatively well, and obviously learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, but kept those going forward. And so I think, it is just kind of seizing the opportunity too. I always tell people, the only person who truly, truly cares about your career is you. Right. There are others who care. Yeah. But there's only one who's really going to make sure you get what you hope you're going to get, and that's you. And that's you. So I kind of took that on. Yeah,
that kind of core motivation. So you used the word mistakes. So I can't let my audience down by not picking on a few of those. And obviously you've had way more successes than mistakes, otherwise you wouldn't be in the role that you're in right now. But give me one or two, because we know that that's the fertile ground for learning. So what one or two of your biggest mistakes where you look back and you probably go, actually, I'm kind of glad I made that mistake because I learned a bunch from it, as opposed to it completely derailed my career, and that was the end.
So there were two actually contemporaneous to that time. So I'll just focus on those. I've got others as well. But one was more of a business mistake or miss, I would say. I sat on the fence too long on what we were going to do in China. So this was probably around 2003. So it was just coming off that period where a lot of multinationals were forming joint ventures in China, and a few were starting to do their own foreign direct investment. And I was running now this global plastics business. This is like $120 million business. And we had some commercial activities in China, but it was getting big enough we needed to make a decision where we're going to actually put a team there and produce and so forth. And I overanalyzed it. Just took too long. Probably used too much of a Western mindset at that time, and it didn't kill us. It delayed us a couple years, but it really taught me to. You need to analyze things. You can't just do everything on gut instinct. But there comes a point in time where you know enough. Where, if you're at that 70% confidence, the cost versus benefit of getting to the 90% confidence, you got to ask yourself, is it going to change?
Is that going to be fundamental?
And so there was that. The other thing is, as part of this acquisition, you're trying to align values and methods of working and all those kinds of things. And we missed a couple things in due diligence.
I mean, it's funny, we do a lot of work, as you know, in the space of cultural due diligence, which is becoming more and more of a thing now, particularly in mergers and acquisitions. Actually, we're seeing a lot of work with private equity portfolio companies, both pre and post close, where they do all the financial due diligence, and then you ask them about the culture and how they learn and understand the culture of the place, and their answer tends to be, well, it's through the process of learning everything else, you just get a feel for it. And so, I've seen so many times that organization having whatever the strategy is or the investment thesis is, and then you actually do the work to assess the culture and go, ooh,
do you know what you're getting into?
I'm not sure this is going to drive that. So therefore, the biggest challenge is how we're going to shift the culture of the organization to be able to move forward. So fortunately, we're seeing it more and more now, and it's not hard to do. I think people think it's hard because culture's a bit of a squishy thing, and you could ask one person what they think it is, and the next person they give you something different. But if you do that work right, as I say to investors, you can put culture on a spreadsheet. We can show you what the culture of an organization is pretty easily, and then you can start to make decisions about what do you want to keep, what needs to change, and what's new that needs to come in.
Well, it's an oversimplification too, but I've always looked at culture as just a collection of behaviors. Like what are the behaviors that are not necessarily written down, but are just kind of what people do. And to your point is, if you can kind of assess those, you can determine which of those are going to be the showstoppers, and do I have a plan to overcome the ones that maybe you have to. So I agree. It's not something to overlook.
And again, as we've been chatting on the way up and yesterday, you quite openly talk about figuring out the right behaviors that are going to drive this through. We're going to be working together. We are working together on a couple of projects. One specifically with you and the leadership team, which has been through quite a bit of change. So let's talk about Quaker Houghton now. So a merger or an acquisition of, somebody told me there is no such thing as a merger. There's only an acquisition. I don't know. However, because somebody's got to do something. So that happened 4 years ago.
2019.
And then you joined in.
I joined the end of 2021.
End of 2021. So, talk to us about the coming together of those two organizations, and then the journey that the organization has been on for the last couple of years.
So until 2019, there was Quaker Chemical and there was Houghton International. Both institutions. And I use that word not loosely. I mean, over 100 years of history, both of them, and had been in similar spaces, but mostly complementary from a geography, technology, position, and market standpoint. And if you looked at it on paper, probably for decades, you'd say, why aren't these together? But they had just never come together. They had the plan. They started all the planning, announced the deal, I believe, in 2017. The teams started working together. The two leadership teams started working together. In 2019, then the merger was completed. Merger combination is the colloquial reference that we use, because they were essentially similar size enterprises. Because Quaker was public, it got integrated at least financially into the Quaker, which is why we still have the stock ticker for Quaker Chemical. But it really was a combination of two equals. The leadership team was made up of folks from both, and I was the first that was brought in from the outside. And the game plan had always been to close the deal, begin integration. The first phase was stabilization. Finish delivering the synergies, and then transformation. A funny little thing happened though.
Just a little thing.
A couple months into the stabilization called COVID, which of course made everything about the integration more challenging. But I give the team incredible credit for what they did accomplish. I would say on the cultural side, they made tremendous headway. as much as you can do two-dimensionally.
By
teams and so forth. A few of the projects got delayed just because of practicalities of being able to travel and things like that. But they made really good headway despite the challenges of COVID. Then rolled very quickly into the global supply chain challenges, which was just before I arrived. It impacted us. Fortunately, we run a very healthy balance sheet, so we put it to use. One of our value propositions to our customers is sustainability of supply, which helped us tremendously during this. So we used our balance sheet to deploy on working capital, build up some inventories, and really be in a position. And our teams did some unbelievably heroic things. There's a lot of examples, but I love to tell the story of our China team, which is in the suburbs of Shanghai. And as the rolling lockdowns were going on, we had, I think, about 72 hours notice that we were going to be going into a lockdown. Team immediately got as much material into the facility as possible to get converted in that 72-hour period of time. Got everything that was there made and out because it was regional, right? It wasn't all of China, so you just had to get it out of the zone. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only one that didn't shut a customer down.
Wow. Well, and they're the stories. The thing I love about the stories people tell is you can pull out of that the culture of the place, right? So you've got the sort of ethical side, you've got the hard-working side, you've got the don't want to let people down side. Like you could reel off a whole bunch of words, and then, as you were saying earlier, what are the behaviours that are there? You know, they're taking the initiative. Those teams are coming together. They're problem solving in the moment. So that story sort of typifies the kind of culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, finding our way through that, we've had a few more challenges. We did have about 2% of our sales in Russia and had to make a decision on what we were doing there, and we made the choice to pull out. We had some business and we had employees in Ukraine, worked with them. Those we could get out, we got out. We had the earthquake in Turkey just earlier this year. So you're constantly dealing with the world. And then inflation. For me personally, even with over 30-year career, I had never operated, nor had most of the people in the organization, in the type of inflation that we were facing. And so we found our way through that as well.
So that would be, my language on this is, I use the words disorientating dilemmas to describe a situation where you have very little or no prior experience of to go back into it. So, the last time this happened, we did this. So let's do something similar. Things have checked, but when you don't have that, so practically, what did the team do? What happened to enable you to kind of work your way through that as you think back?
A lot of engagement.
A lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of ideas.
I mean, first, the team, it's always been built in the nature of the Quaker Houghton employees and colleagues to assess value and try to capture value from customers. So we don't just go tell our customers what the cost of our inputs are and then put a margin on top of it and say, there's your price.
Okay.
We're typically talking about how much are we going to reduce your scrap next quarter? What are we going to commit to on your uptime and your quality level on a certain grade of steel for the next 6 months? And then we assess a value associated with that, with milestones we have to live with, and then price based on that. So it's a really robust value and use model, and what has served really well for at least the last decade, if not longer, was it was a relatively stable environment. The biggest thing for us this time was how long is this going to last? Because it didn't appear that it was going to be a 1 or 2 quarter kind of thing. So the first thing was us engaging and really getting to an agreement on that.
On what do we think?
And then we had to get more into what do we anticipate is going to happen. Rather than what can we prove has happened. I think what ultimately did it, though, was there came a point in time where I just said, okay, look, I've heard everybody's feedback. I understand, because the immediate reaction is, if we go too aggressive, we're going to lose
clients,
a whole bunch of business. And that was a significant concern of mine too. I mean, I don't think we were never trying to be reckless by what we were doing. But I finally just said, you know what, this is my decision, so If it doesn't go right, it's on me.
So was that 70, 100, going back to decision making earlier you talked about, was that 80, 100 based on the
I
data?
might have been approaching 70. I was over 50, but I was definitely not at 90.
Right.
But it was, and we did it and then started to really develop that muscle and started to have some success. And yeah, we've had a little bit of churn.
Right.
But a relatively minor amount of churn, and I think the team. Oh,
we got a visitor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it
Hopefully not a vulture.
Yeah.
So that's good.
We're not dying yet. I'm getting hungry, but I'm not dying yet.
but I think it was really just the combination of taking all the feedback, engaging in the discussion, talking about the trade-offs. Me and the leadership team explaining why we felt we needed to do it, and then taking some of the pressure off the team. It's like, look, if this doesn't go exactly the way, and you're right, that's on us, and we'll manage through that.
Yeah, and that gives people the comfort to take the risks and do what needs to be done to say you've got cover. So that's great. So let's dig into my world. Half of my view is folks like yourself, so they're running businesses and so on and so forth. So they'll be taking away a lot from that. And then half of my audience is people like Kyle and Melissa who work on your team on the HR and leadership and DEI side of the business. So as you think about the culture that's developing at Quaker Houghton, what's key for you? What are those? You mentioned behaviors earlier. Like if you could name 3 or 4 that is really gonna underpin the performance of the organization, and you had a great first quarter, and we want a great rest of the year. What is it from a behavior standpoint, from a culture standpoint, that's going to drive?
Yeah, the 2 that immediately come to mind is we're just continuing to reinforce teamwork. We're at a scale now where we have to. We have to take advantage of that. I explained to you, Quaker and Houghton prior to the combination were $700 to $800 million companies, and now we're at $2 billion with aspirations to get bigger. We've started to take advantage of the scale of some of our functions globally, like our R&D teams. Like we run virtual labs now globally, where the same people who are working on the same subject space may be sitting thousands of
distributed
miles
all over the world.
So it's really reinforcing that proactive teamwork, and it's the proactive part of it. It's the always thinking and engaging with who else is going to be able to help me, or I can help them. And I think just building that naturally into how we operate, we just have to keep taking that to a higher and higher level all the time. The other one is curiosity. One of the challenges is this has been a well-run company, and it's been very successful. And when you're then trying to convince people you need to transform and there's opportunity to go even further, the natural human reaction is, why? Like, why don't we keep doing what we're doing, and why are we doing things differently? And so trying to build in a little more of that curiosity of not saying what's broken, but what's the opportunity if we do it.
And is that how you would describe how would you describe the transformation? Like, what's the high level sort of description of that? Is that going to the next level of scale?
Yeah, so the way we talk about it, I mean, I've answered this a lot of times for investors.
So
I'll give you the same answer. There's really 3 themes for us on it, because fundamentally, we don't want to change our customer intimate approach. We're not fundamentally changing the markets we serve. There's still ample opportunity and space for us to grow organically and inorganically within that space. But where we can really grow from here is, one, I say globalize, which what I really mean is scale. Take advantage of our scale. And that R&D example is a perfect one. I don't care if the lab in India came up with the solution, or the lab in Michigan, or the lab in Thailand came up with it. And if we can redeploy that somewhere else in the world where a customer has a similar problem, and do it seamlessly and quickly, win. Win for the customer, win for us. So there's that globality piece of it. The second thing is around sustainability. So I already talked about that, but I mean, just taking all of those things to a different level in how we think, how we operate, how we position ourselves, and how we prioritize.
And how you support your customers' needs in that space as well.
Exactly. And then the last one is really digitize is the simple way of saying it. So you can imagine we have employees that are on our customers' floor. And one of the things they do, for example, is to take samples, because often there's a bath with our material in it that's being applied to a sheet or to a CNC machine.
Yep.
And you have to test it because it's living. It degrades, it gets contaminated. And so you have to make adjustments to it. You may eventually have to recharge and go with new materials. And so one of the ways they do that is they'll take samples on a regular basis. They'll go back, they have their own little analytical lab at the customer's facility. And from that, they'll determine, hey, let's go back and make some adjustments. And what we're doing now is starting to invest in digital capabilities, taking advantage of the Internet of Things, where it is today and where we think it's going, to start using things like inline sensors and developing some of our own algorithms to where we can look at multiple factors and we understand.
Right.
The people who are walking around.
Yeah, so it's not all in there.
But these are not single factors. There's usually multiple factors. And what we want to do first is be able to monitor. So real basic, just like red light, green light. So you don't have to have a human being going and taking a sample. It's like red, something's off. Okay, now it needs attention. Then we want to eventually get to where we can control. So you can imagine subsequent generations, we may have an ability, even with equipment, to dose.
Right, to prevent the red light in the first place.
So now the red light's off, we know what caused the red light, now we know what dosing to do automatically, we don't have to go do it. And ultimately what we want to do is optimize to where if we can build algorithms and understand these patterns and so forth, that you actually anticipate 2 days before the red light is even coming.
Yeah.
So globalize, sustainable, digitization are really the key themes for us as we're transforming.
Nice. And then that begs the last question, which is around leadership and what is it going to take to lead that transformation? You talked about teamwork and curiosity, and I think that's probably general across the whole organization. You want that mindset, but leading that, and I'm not just talking about you here, the leadership team, and all leaders in the business. How are you thinking about the sort of core tenets of leading that transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I know I cheated a little bit. I've actually watched a few of your videos.
You're the one.
So I knew that there would be a question along this, and I actually did a curious thing. I was like, well, I have in my mind what that is and what's worked in previous transformations.
Yeah.
But I decided to actually go back and talk to some people that had worked with me before in other transformations that I've done, and kind of like
try and unpick that. Well, it's like you talked about the algorithm for your chemicals. What's the algorithm for the transformation from a leadership standpoint?
What are the consistent factors? I mean, the way you deploy them, they're all unique, but what are the consistent factors? And I kind of grouped them, and it came up, it was like 4 Gs. It's like, the first thing is group, and what I mean is we're in this together. It's kind of reinforcing the teamwork.
So connectedness.
The teamwork has to be there for us to be able to move things forward in a positive direction. The second thing is really around goals. So we got to have defined things we're trying to do. We have to agree to them. We have to hold each other accountable. We have to measure against those things. We can't just leave things in the ether. We really have to be able to move those things forward. The other thing. I'm missing one of them, but is really go. It's take action.
That's the action. Going back to your 70-100.
And it's don't wait until you have all the information. And equally, don't be afraid to pivot.
Yeah.
So learn as you're going.
Yeah.
And that's the 4th G. It just came back to me. It's really growth, right? You got to have a growth mentality, not growth of the business.
Yeah.
Growth as a leader, growth for the organization, continuous improvement. Back to, let's not wait until something's broken.
Yeah.
Let's anticipate what could be better and identify those things and kind of get it. And I think those are the things. It's around acting as a group, having a growth mentality, making sure that you have goals,
Yeah,
and then go.
and then go. You've got that pace, you've got that energy, you've got that motivation in the system. That's really neat. And we often talk about, and clients often go down the road of creating leadership competencies and capabilities, and they spend nearly as long developing them. Then the context changes and they don't fit anymore.
Yeah.
But if you think about those four things, they're
just
sort
adapt them.
of it's not tied to the particular current context.
Exactly.
In a way that it's going to be like, well, no, we don't need that in the future, kind of thing. There might be other things that come along, but I think that's the trick, especially as we talked about. We had with the pandemic, and then supply chain issues, and then the war in Europe, and then high inflation, and we know there's going to be the next thing. It's just a matter
All that
of
stuff rolls off the tongue too easily.
Too easy, but that's what
each one of those things could have been like decade-defining crises.
Yeah, and they've been what 2 years, all four. Yeah. So we talk about the estimated time between surprises is shrinking.
Yeah,
right. So we know the next thing is probably, I don't know, 3-6 months away for whatever it is. As much as I'm like, oh my God, what's it going to be?
I'm hoping it's the law of averages, though. We
get four done and then we're good for 30 years. Oh, I like your think. I like the optimism.
Hope's not a strategy.
Yeah, that's
Hope's
right.
Not a strategy.
But it's that ability, within that sort of macro context to say, right, how do we need to be leading the organization?
Yeah.
And that seems to fit that sort of longer running, regardless of what happens in 2 months' time or 6 months' time. If we keep we keep focused on this stuff as a leadership group within the organization, and I'm talking all the way down through the organization, all levels of leadership, then that will serve you. Very, very nicely. So what next? Other than walking back down this mountain to the car,
hoping the quads hold out on
the way down.
On the way down.
But what's next for you and the business? And what are you excited about?
Really, just a continuation of that strategy execution.
Yeah.
As you said, you're working with us. We're going to be working on continuing to refine our leadership effectiveness and going forward. But we did the strategy evolution last year, the true transformation, which I'm very proud that we didn't allow all those other things to distract us,
derail you
and
from.
Just stop.
Yeah.
We also then have been very prudent to say, okay, we're maybe not yet in a normal environment where we can go execute everything. But equally, we're not going to stop everything.
Yeah.
So we're kind of metering in. So what we're doing, we started off the first part of this year executing on what we called our imperatives.
Yeah.
On growth strategies and some of the enablers that we need to build up some of our supply chain capabilities, some of our digital capabilities, some of our talent and development. We now have the next set of options that we're evaluating kind of as we see how we've done on our milestones, how the economics of the world are looking, how we're performing. Now we're starting to look at those next. And we've got a whole series of things to be queued up over multiple years. Our enterprise strategy is meant to last through the end of the decade.
Right.
So we don't have projects laid out all the way through the end of the decade.
You got choices, decision gates, how are we progressing? What's the next thing we want to bite off on?
It's a continuation, of that. And then for me personally, one of the things I'm trying to prioritize more, probably not surprising given the world we just talked about that I came into, I spent a lot of my time in the business versus on the business.
Yeah.
And I want to start shifting that a little bit more and getting that in balance.
Yeah.
I'm not a big believer in although I've taken my own left turns, is like I don't want to take the organization through a bunch of left turns. It's a continuous flow of streams that are coming together.
Yeah, you're not having to turn the place around. You're not having to. From a transformation standpoint, you've got those three key pillars, and you're going after them, and that's going to give you the sustained growth that you're looking for. Yeah, it's good. That's going to be an exciting.
I think so.
Journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing it play out, seeing the decisions that the organization takes and the success that's going to come from those.
And the mistakes we'll make, and we'll learn, and we'll adjust.
Yeah, and the changes that are coming that we don't even want to imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's brilliant. Well, I think it's time we we wrapped up and headed down. Well, I'll finish with one. Maybe I'll finish with one question. I've used it on a couple of route to the tops, and that is any question that I haven't asked that you thought I might.
One is, why did I pick? Because you allowed me to. You allowed me to.
That was going to be my second second opening question.
Well, there's two parts to my answer, so
let's go for it.
There. So
why Rocky National Park?
So here we are in
Colorado?
Rocky Mountain National Park. So I'm a kid who grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, on the east side of Des Moines, Iowa, and for the first 12 years of my life, had seen nothing other than the flatlands of the Midwest.
Yeah.
You know, adjacent states, going to visit families and so forth. And one of my older brothers moved out here in 1978, and so my mom and I came out with him on the move with his wife and an oldest son, and we got here and we're going up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and so this was the first time I ever saw anything that wasn't the flatland.
And what a view!
And what a spectacular view, right? But I also take that back to kind of how it impacted, because I think it was one of the first times I started really thinking, there's a world out there.
Yeah.
There's a world that I want to see. And so as we were trying to come up with places where maybe we could do a little bit of a mountain climb, I'm like, it'd be fun to go back 45 years later.
Yeah.
Not that I've done this particular climb before, but I thought that would be kind of a cool thing. At least it is for me.
But it goes to that adventurous spirit of, coming out of Des Moines, Iowa, and going to live in Wales, and going to live in France, and going to work in China, and here,
My wife thinks I lived in Brazil for a while.
You just spent a lot of time visiting Brazil. They're the adventures that get spurred on. I asked you, I think it was on the way up, what was the country that you felt like you didn't belong the most, what are some of those, and that's, it's a key question. When was the last time you felt like you didn't belong, full stop? An easy answer is a foreign country, because it drops you into something very different. Mine was actually a piece of work with a client very recently, where I ended up in a situation with two people that I had never been in before and I've done a lot of facilitation, done a lot of coaching, and I was like, I have never experienced this before, and I had nowhere to go, to get that, and I felt like in that moment, in that room, like I didn't belong. Yeah. But how much of that has now been in my mind for the last 2 or 3 weeks? A ton, because I've learned from it. I was like, okay, next time I would do this, and I've talked to a dozen people about it. It's like, why did I feel so out of it in that moment? And so they're the really rich.
Well, if you put yourself in those,
moments.
If you're willing to put yourself in those circumstances and survive it, you actually build up some confidence that, okay, the next time I'm in it, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I, going back to your 4Gs, heavily relied on the group coming out of that situation to say, right, help me just review this and learn from this in my own mind. You weren't there, but here was the situation. And when you have those kind of strong connections and that ability to work together, I talk about it a lot from the point of resilience. Yeah. People think resilience is a high individual thing, like I'm resilient, I can take on whatever, as long as you're fit and strong and getting enough sleep and recover from setbacks and so on and so forth. Actually, the one thing that underpins resilience more than anything else is being connected to other people. Yeah. So that sense of connectedness is huge.
Human beings.
And I talk about Everest, and people say, what were the key things for getting you up there? Was it the training? Was it the oxygen? Was it this, that, the other? Yeah, it was all of those things and the skills, but probably the biggest thing that underpinned all of that was connectedness to the people that were there, whether that's the Sherpas or the guides or the expedition leader or other team members, but also the people who weren't there, like my family, my parents, my friends, who I knew were all thinking about me. Yeah. And as I was hiking up the hard stretches, I gotta put one more foot in front of the other, because I know Mum is worried about this and this, like that human connectedness, helps you be more resilient as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Well, you hit on the other one because I promised, because you just got there at the end of yours. The other question is, what am I wearing here? So my two kids, we were basically an insular family, because you can imagine I'm dragging them all over the world. We moved, my wife and I counted the other day, we've moved since we've been married 14 times.
Wow.
And she also informed me there won't be a 15th. But as I indicated, she's been very flexible, and obviously couldn't have done anything that I was able to on my route.
Yeah.
But the kids too. I mean, we've got extended family, but they didn't grow up with an extended family, so those were always visits and things we had to do and everything. So anyway, both of them, I'm representing.
You're wearing both
I'm
of
representing,
them. Who went where?
My son's finishing up grad school at Elon. My daughter's just about to start grad school at Roger Williams. So I wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out.
Yeah, you got the whole team with you. I love it. Yeah. Well, this is you've lined me up for my bit. Yeah. This is normally wear my Patagonia hat. Paul Lightfoot, Patagonia Provisions. He's one of my episodes, so I was fully Patagonia'd out. But yeah, time for a bit of canvas logoing in the mix as well. So yeah, it's good.
Well, I don't know if we could guarantee this weather would hold, we might just stay up here.
I think we should just go up there.
I might watch you.
I'm so tempted. Andy,
all right, man.
What a pleasure.
It's been great.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Joe.